This is the story of a woman who survived a difficult chapter because a stranger gave her a chance when she needed it most.
ねえ、ご飯できた。起きて。
後で行く。
わかった。待ってるね。
For years, her life had followed a simple, comforting rhythm, shared meals, modest plans, and the quiet confidence that tomorrow would look much like today. She believed that stability, once earned, would naturally last. That belief began to change when her husband started struggling at work. It wasn't a sudden collapse or a public failure, just a slow erosion of confidence that settled into their home like an uninvited guest. Rika noticed it in the way he spoke less at dinner, in the way he lingered over job listings without saying much. There was no blame, no anger, only a growing understanding that their family needed something more solid to lean on. Rika had never imagined herself searching for a job at this stage of her life. She had been content managing the home, supporting her husband in quiet ways, and believing that their shared effort was enough. But now, practicality spoke louder than comfort. She understood that love sometimes meant stepping forward without being asked.
ごちそうさま。食欲あんまりなく。
そう。
One morning, with a neatly prepared but very simple resume in her hands, she left the house earlier than usual and walked down a familiar street toward a small restaurant she had passed countless times before. The restaurant wasn't impressive at first glance. It was modest, clean, and welcoming in an unassuming way. The kind of place people visited not for luxury, but for warmth. Rika hesitated at the door, taking a breath to steady herself. She reminded herself that this wasn't about pride or fear. It was about responsibility and hope. When she stepped inside, the gentle sounds of clinking dishes and soft conversation filled the air, grounding her nerves. That was when she met him, the restaurant owner, a man she had never spoken to before, yet someone who would soon hold an unexpected place in her story. He listened as she introduced herself, her voice calm but careful. She didn't overshare or explain her situation in detail. She simply spoke honestly about wanting to work and being willing to learn. The man didn't interrupt. He didn't ask questions that made her uncomfortable. He just listened. After a brief pause, he smiled. It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic promise. It was a quiet, human moment of recognition. He told her she could start soon. No long interviews, no unnecessary skepticism, just a chance. In that moment, Rika felt something she hadn't realized. She was missing relief mixed with gratitude. It wasn't luck that brought her here. It was trust, offered freely by a stranger. From that day forward, Rika approached her work with focus and humility. She learned how the restaurant moved, how small details mattered, how consistency built trust. She paid attention, asked questions when appropriate, and stayed late when help was needed. She didn't complain about being tired, and she didn't dwell on what had brought her there. Instead, she treated the job as something meaningful, something worth protecting.
着替えました。
よし。じゃあ着替えたら早速掃除からやろうか。まずね、床モップで掃除してもらうんで。
はい。失礼いたします。お待たせいたしました。
なんかそうそう。
カルボナーラと。
ボーモレとほうれん草サラダ。
はい。 ボンゴレとほうれん草サラダお願いします。
はい、了解。あ、渡辺さん。これ、お昼。先食べてて。
すいません。いただきます。
あとこっち、俺やっとくから。
はい、ありがとうございます。
At home, she remained the same steady presence her husband had always known. She didn't speak about her worries or the weight she carried during the day. Instead, she suggested evening walks, shared quiet moments with a book, and reminded him gently that difficult chapters didn't define a whole life. She believed that encouragement didn't have to be loud to be effective.
たまには散歩でもしない？ずっと家の中にいるし、健康に良くないよ。
散歩ね。読みたい本もあったし、それを買いに行くのもいいかな。
うん、行こう。ここ座ろう。
あ、せやな。
失礼いたします。ボンゴレのお客さん。失礼します。こちらペスカトーレでございます。ごゆっくりどうぞ。
今日はビーフシチュー。
すごくいい匂いがします。
Over time, the restaurant owner began to notice her, not in a way that felt intrusive, but with the attentiveness of someone who understands people.
シチューの味どうかな？何してんの？
He saw her dedication, the way she worked with care even when no one was watching. He also noticed something else, a thoughtful distance in her eyes, as if part of her mind was always somewhere else, calculating and worrying in silence. He didn't ask her to explain herself. He didn't push for personal details. He simply allowed her the space to do her work with dignity. And in that quiet respect, Rika found something rare, a workplace where she felt seen without being exposed. There were days when the pressure felt heavier than usual. Days when Rika wondered if she was doing enough, if her efforts truly made a difference. But each time she considered stepping back, something held her steady. The memory of that first smile. The knowledge that someone had believed in her when she needed it most. At this point in her journey, Rika didn't yet realize how deeply that single act of kindness would shape her future. She only knew that she was moving forward, one careful step at a time, supported by the trust of a man who was still, in many ways, a stranger. Still, Rika carried a weight she rarely acknowledged. At home, her husband tried to remain optimistic, but uncertainty lingered between them like an unfinished conversation. At home, her husband tried to remain optimistic, but uncertainty lingered between them like an unfinished conversation. Some evenings were filled with hopeful planning, while others passed in silence. Rika understood that reassurance alone wasn't enough. Progress required time and steady effort from both of them. There were moments when Rika considered stepping away. The responsibility she felt toward her family sometimes made her question whether she could continue balancing everything. She wondered if she was asking too much of herself. Yet each time that thought surfaced, she remembered why she had started. Not out of obligation, but out of care. Not out of fear, but out of hope. Rika realized that the future she and her husband imagined would require honest conversations and thoughtful decisions. She felt the weight of responsibility more strongly than ever. There was no sense of defeat, only the recognition that growth often arrived quietly, through choices that demanded courage rather than drama. She noticed her husband was unusually quiet, his posture stiff with the weight of unspoken thoughts. The familiar comfort of their shared routine felt fragile, as if both of them sensed that something important needed to be addressed. They sat together at the table, not as people in conflict, but as partners searching for understanding. Her husband spoke carefully, explaining that before leaving his previous position, he had made commitments he believed he could manage. Circumstances had changed, and now those responsibilities demanded serious attention. There was no anger in his voice, only honesty and a desire to face reality together. For Rika, the conversation was difficult, but it was also grounding. Clarity, she realized, was better than uncertainty. That night, she weighed her options quietly. She thought about the effort she had invested at the restaurant, the trust that had been placed in her, and the sense of purpose she had found there. She wondered whether stepping away would help or only add to the uncertainty. The thought of disappointing someone who had shown her respect unsettled her, but so did the fear of stretching herself too thin. The following day, Rika arrived at work earlier than usual. She carried herself with composure, but internally, she was preparing for a difficult conversation. When the restaurant owner noticed her and asked if everything was all right, she chose honesty, measured, and calm. She explained that her family situation required careful planning and that she had considered whether continuing to work was the responsible choice. The owner listened without interruption, just as he had on the day they first met. There was a moment of silence, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. He acknowledged her concerns and thanked her for being transparent. He didn't rush to conclusions or make promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he considered the situation from both a business and a human perspective. What followed was not a dramatic speech, but a practical decision shaped by empathy. He told Rika that her contribution mattered and that he valued consistency and commitment. If she was willing to continue working with the same care she had shown, he was willing to support her in doing so. The conditions were clear, fair, and grounded in mutual respect. For Rika, this response carried unexpected weight. It wasn't leniency or charity, it was trust reaffirmed. In that moment, she felt seen not as a problem to be managed, but as a capable individual navigating a complex chapter of life. The decision strengthened her resolve rather than easing her responsibility. That evening, she returned home with a steady confidence she hadn't felt in weeks. She shared the conversation with her husband, not to seek reassurance, but to invite collaboration. They talked openly about their priorities, about the adjustments they would need to make, and about the importance of facing challenges together rather than separately. The discussion was calm, deliberate, and constructive. They didn't search for quick fixes or dramatic solutions. Instead, they focused on what they could control, planning carefully, supporting one another, and maintaining perspective. Rika reminded her husband of his strengths, the skills and experience that still belonged to him regardless of circumstance. He listened, encouraged by her steadiness. Small shifts began to take place. Her husband explored new opportunities with renewed focus, no longer defined by uncertainty, but guided by intention. Rika, in turn, approached her work with even greater clarity, understanding that stability was built through consistency rather than sudden breakthroughs. The restaurant owner continued to provide support in subtle ways. He adjusted schedules when possible and communicated expectations clearly. His leadership remained firm but fair, reinforcing an environment where trust flowed both ways. Rika responded by maintaining high standards, aware that gratitude was best expressed through action. Rika came to an important realization. Gratitude wasn't passive. It wasn't simply feeling thankful. It was honoring the opportunity by rising to meet it. The stranger who had given her a chance hadn't asked for recognition or repayment. He had simply chosen to act with integrity. As the uncertainty that once dominated her thoughts began to loosen its hold, Rika recognized how pivotal that choice had been, not because it solved every problem, but because it created space for progress. In learning to navigate this chapter with honesty and resilience, she understood that her debt to the stranger was not measured in words, but in the life she was steadily rebuilding. As time moved forward, Rika felt the quiet tension she once carried begin to loosen. Life was not suddenly easy, but it felt more balanced, shaped by calm choices rather than constant worry. Her work became a source of structure and dignity. The owner's steady guidance and his kindness without expectations taught her that true generosity creates space for others to grow. At home, her marriage grew stronger through open conversations and shared patience. Small steps rebuilt confidence, and planning for the future felt possible again. Rika realized how easily her path could have changed, and how one thoughtful decision had made all the difference. Gratitude no longer felt like a burden, but a direction. She learned that kindness does not demand repayment. It continues through action. Rika's story reminds us that life often changes quietly, through ordinary moments of trust, compassion, and the courage to begin again. If this story touched you, take a moment to appreciate the quiet kindness around you. And if you enjoy meaningful stories about life, resilience, and hope, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for the next story.